This is episode 41 of Standing Out. Standing Out is a remarkable interview-style podcast with the intention to highlight women and men making outstanding contributions in their field. This podcast is generously sponsored by Think Global. Think Global is a business advisory firm working with women entrepreneurs around the globe to scale their businesses to the next level. This podcast is also generously sponsored by Smash Fund. Smash Fund is for the dreamer who dares to dream, the entrepreneur who eats obstacles for lunch, and a place where passions, people, and life collide. You can find your special invitation code in the description of this podcast. Today, I'd like to welcome Dr. Christine Wiedinmyer. Dr. Christine Wiedinmyer is a scientist in the Atmospheric Chemistry Observation and Modeling Laboratory of the National Center for Atmospheric Research. Dr. Wiedinmyer's research emphasizes the identification and quantification of various emission sources and modeling the transport and fate of pollutants in the atmosphere. Her research interest includes evaluating ways in which climate, technology, and policy impact air quality. She is the lead of several international projects and collaborates with researchers around the globe. Christine is also a founding member on the board of the Earth Science Women's Network, ESWN. Christine received her master's and PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin and a BSc in chemical engineering from Tulane University. On a personal note, Christine is the mother of Finn, who's 10, and Maggie, who's 13, and an active women's lacrosse official. Welcome, Christine. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I love that. One of the things when I'm reading your bio, I get the feeling that you followed a very sort of linear path. Like you went to school for particular degrees and you work in that field. Do you feel linear, or do you feel more of the up and down?
It definitely ended up turning out to be linear, but I feel like I kind of fell into my specialty, my interests, I just along the way, fortuitously.
Isn't that interesting? Because I feel like once you're kind of where you're going, or, you know, depending on, I don't know, once you're kind of where you're going, it's like, oh yeah, if you look back, it's so linear. But in the middle of it, it felt like, oh, where am I going? What am I doing? How are these dots connecting?
Exactly. I mean, I went to University of Texas thinking I was going to be a chemical engineer. I had no idea what I was going to study, but I knew I wanted to land back up in Colorado. And I ended up getting a fantastic advisor who looked at air quality issues, and I loved it. And at the same time, I met my colleagues who I now work with at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Colorado. And that all just kind of came together. It was very fortunate that I ended up picking a research topic that I ended up loving and finding a place that I was fortunate enough to work at. And
yeah. And Colorado seems like a fantastic place for this research.
It really is. Boulder in particular is a mecca for air quality research between universities and national labs there. And there's a lot of really active and interesting projects going on.
How do you choose what projects to follow or not to follow? I feel like whether you're working for a company or an organization, or you're on the entrepreneurial side, I feel like that is always this thing of we all want to follow everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's actually a really big challenge, is not to follow everything, but to actually identify things to focus on. And that actually is a really good question, because there's so many places and projects to choose from. But I try to identify projects, one that really energize me. Projects and topics that I think are really important. I really like applied research, so looking at issues not only that are important for science, but also important for society. And then what's really important to me is identifying the right collaborators. I don't do anything in a vacuum. I do everything with pretty large groups. And what I've been doing a lot recently is looking for groups that have really a different expertise and bringing them together. Like my project in Africa right now, we're looking at different cook stove technologies, because people cook over open fires. It's dangerous for their health. It's problematic for climate, and this goes on all across the developing world. And there's a lot of efforts to use new technologies to reduce the pollution, to be more efficient, and improve health and improve climate. But there's a lot of issues associated with that. And so I have a team that includes engineers and an economist and public health experts. And it's been, I think, making a bigger difference having that interdisciplinary approach.
So that is so interesting. So two things are coming to my mind. One, I've been to South Africa, and I visited a school in a small village, and I remember walking outside the school, and they were making lunch for the children, and it was, just the one big pot with what appeared to be like oats or something, and then on the open fire. And I guess I've never really thought about, open fire is probably not the best thing to be breathing in every day.
No, in fact, there's estimates that it kills millions of people prematurely each year, particularly women and kids.
Wow.
So the State Department has huge efforts, and there's a lot of non-governmental organizations, and it's definitely recognized as a problem.
Yeah. Then the other thing that kind of struck my ears when you were talking was about collaborations and identifying people you can work with in these collaborations. I'd love to know, what is the lens you're looking through when you're identifying people to work with? Is it personality types? Is it special? Is it hey, I like hanging out with you, you'd be awesome to work with? What's the tangible thing?
Actually, I think that is really, really important. People that you can work with personality-wise. I think, especially now after my experience through many, many different projects, I think that's essential. If you can't get along with your collaborators, then nothing's going to go anywhere.
Right.
So I think that, in my mind, is number one. And then two is finding people with different expertise and different ways of looking at a problem than I do. I find that, granted, I work with a lot of people that do look at things very similar to me, but in order to really advance, say, the science or the technology, I think it's really important to bring in people that really have a different approach than I do, and then trying to mesh everyone together.
I think that's right. When you say that, I even look at my children who are both very bright kids, but they have very different strengths. So our daughter processes verbally and our son processes spatially. And so they can both find awesome answers and and they're little, they're 5 and 7. They can find awesome answers and solutions, but to get there, it's a work, it's so different. It's interesting.
Different. And it's actually been really, I think it makes me a better person and a better researcher, because it kind of forces me to think about things outside of my comfort zone.
That's awesome. So with all of these collaborations going on and working with a variety of people, what's kind of a normal day for you?
Getting kids out the door. Actually, before that even I usually get up
number one complete.
Actually, I like to get up early and use the early morning hours to exercise, to kind of get myself going. And then once I get the kids out the door, a typical day, I have a great office in Boulder, and so I spend my day kind of either looking at data and kind of with my door closed, doing some thinking and analysis. And then the other part of my day, for example, today I have a large research group meeting where we'll talk about the different components of our project and things that are going on with our big group for our Africa project.
Okay.
And then I do a lot of other community service activities. For example, right now I'm organizing a conference for an international society that I'm a part of. And
that's cool.
So actually today I have meetings with communications and outreach, as well as looking at program materials for our sponsors. So it really includes everything from sitting behind closed doors by myself to interacting with a whole host of different people, from other researchers to administrators to program directors, etc.
Now, I'll share a secret with everyone, and that is because before the interview, Christine said, "But I'm not an entrepreneur. Am I a good fit for this?" Your day feels really entrepreneurial to me. I'm just put that out there.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I thought more about that in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
And I think scientists are in a lot of ways entrepreneurial, because they have to take new approaches, figure out how to solve problems. I mean, we're constantly questioning and writing proposals and getting projects off the ground.
Yeah.
So I guess in that way, we're very entrepreneurial.
Yeah, and I think that the project piece and the collaboration piece is kind of what struck me as entrepreneurial, in that a lot of entrepreneurs do not work on just one project at a time. It's several projects going on with several different groups of people. And so anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you, Christine.
That's definitely my life, is many, many different projects, different groups, different people I interact with, and yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned technology in your bio, and I would love to know how you're seeing technology play a part in what you do and the benefits of emerging technologies.
Well, I think emerging technologies impact my research, my life every day. And just a few examples. For example, I'm in the chemistry lab, and we're really interested in measuring different pollutants in the atmosphere. And so the technology to be able to identify and quantify what's in the air has just grown exponentially. It's just been amazing, from instrumentation development and then how it gets applied. Another way that technology continually influences our projects is looking at technology change and how that impacts the environment. So again, back to our cook stoves, we have all new technologies for cooking, and we're really interested in how people use those new technologies, if they use it, what's the market for those technologies, how they get people to adopt new technologies. And so that's actually a large part of our project. And granted, that focuses in the developing world, but I think it has global impacts. A lot of the companies that are building the technologies are in developed countries. So, and then they deal with the whole marketing, distribution, supply side of things.
Do you ever have challenges with, so you've done all this research and there's technologies that are then going to market, whether it be the developing world or the developed world, but then there's just not user adoption on it, and you're looking at your research like, people, come on. Do you ever face that?
Yes. yes. In fact, that's been a major issue in this cook stove research. That we have the technology. I mean, in our homes we have, ovens and stoves,
right,
and grills, and why not take those technologies elsewhere? And it's just been amazing that you really have to consider cultural influences and societal influences. For example, we were, distributing and showing women women in households who cook, and we're showing them these new stoves, and like, oh, they're great, we'll use, they say that, and then the husband comes home and is like, you're not cooking that food on that stove, and totally rejecting it just because they want everything traditional, and it's a patriarchal society, and that's how it goes. And so it's been really, really eye-opening for me, because again, I came at this problem as an engineer. We have a solution, let's just apply it.
Whatever.
There's so many behavioral and cultural and social issues involved with technological advances that it's been extremely eye-opening.
There's a lot of layers. So
completely. And I think that's in a lot of different technologies.
Yeah. How do you keep how do you keep an eye on latest trends or emerging technologies as you're doing these research projects?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I mean, one thing is I surround myself with people who I think are a lot more in the know than me, and I make sure that I use them. That's my best way. But I mean, going to meetings, going to conferences, I stay up on social media as best as I can. I think it's being used more and more, at least in our field. And in our field also, a lot's written and through like peer-reviewed literature. So again, I rely on a lot of other people to read the literature for me, but I feel like there's a constant influx of information that you get every day, but
there is.
You do your best to stay on top of it all.
It's hard to stay on top of it all, and I love that you say that you have people that read the literature and relay that back to you, because I know in our space of marketing, I can't possibly be on top of all the blogs and content and best practices that there are now. Of course I do my best, but there are articles that slip through the cracks. So I think that's helpful. So your team is doing it.
And that's one of the reasons why I love Twitter, is because people started posting, updates and new releases and everything. And it's a quick way to get something. And I built a network there where people definitely forward along things to me to make sure that
that's really cool.
I'm aware of certain new advances or new releases or new papers. And so that's very helpful.
So final question here, as you're an insider on several things. So what is currently on your radar that you think maybe in a year or 2 years from now, us as kind of the general public will, our eyes and ears will be open to it? Like, what trends or hot topics are you predicting?
Well, I guess my interests are in air quality and health. I think there's a lot more interactions looking at the interactions and impacts from air pollution on public health. I think there's going to be a lot more study on that and a lot more releases. And I think you're going to also, and this is kind of aside something different, but a lot more about women in science and women taking larger roles. Again, I'm on the board of the Earth Science Women's Network, and there's been a lot of activity along with our network to promote, retain, advance women in the earth sciences, which is where I am. So I think there's going to be a lot more out there for that.
I think you're right. I was at, it was an engineering conference, I don't know, a year or so ago, and I was shocked. And I've always known, like in particular fields, particularly science, there's less women in that field. And I've known that, but I think I never grasped how many less. I mean, this is the first event I went to where there was no line for the ladies' room, but I've never seen a mass.
Welcome to my world.
like it was almost culture shock. Like, and that moment stood out to me. Oh my gosh, there really are, I don't know, 95, 98% men here. It was really interesting to see. So I'm glad that, as an insider as you are, you're looking at it as that is changing, and we'll all be noticing and talking about it. So I really appreciate it. Christine, thank you so much for being here today and taking some time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.